And I had experience in working in the Ministry of Energy, dealing with the energy issues, with the consumer protection rights. So knowing this field from inside. So I would like first to give the floor to Jürgen Kipp, the Ombudsman of Schlichtungsstelle Energie from Germany. Jürgen, can you explain, please, what are the main targets of your organization, and how it was created, and what are the main, by the way, financial basis for working of this organization? So how it exists, how it depends on market players, and how it can make independent decisions. Jürgen, your floor.
Guten Morgen, meine Damen und Herren. Ich danke Ihnen herzlich für die Einladung zu dieser Veranstaltung.
Доброго ранку, шановні пані та панове.
Good morning, dear colleagues. I'm glad that I can take part in this meeting. I am Jürgen Kipp, and during my previous activities I was in the judiciary system. And after I was the ombudsman on energy issues in Germany. And let me briefly tell you how this institution, this office, was created in Germany. The situation was like in your country. Energy sector there were monopolies in the sector. And for more than 100 years in Germany, there was an institution that regulated energy market, including energy of market of electricity. At the end of 1990s in Germany, there was liberalization of energy market connected with European processes that were ongoing. The situation was like this, that as of today in Germany, we have 1,100 companies that supply electricity. And in the gas sector, we have about 600 companies. So the result is like this. German consumer can conclude the contract on gas or electricity. He can choose the company that will supply and in this way, at the level of suppliers who want to supply gas or electricity, there is tough competition. We can observe that this competition is continuously changing. And often we can see, especially during the last years, that the firms that supply energy resources, they grew and they increased due to aggressive advertisement among consumers. So this method, due to which they grew, is that while concluding new contracts for supply, the new clients were provided with low prices for energy, and there were some even dumping of prices. And the benefit for the company was that after the first year of supply of energy, they increased the price significantly. And they hoped that the new consumer will be reconciled with such method. So this tactics of suppliers is not forbidden by law. State regulator, so-called agency of federal networks, while using these methods, when the suppliers use these methods, this institution do not intervene. But this approach, this method, raises dissatisfaction among the clients. And before I was asked why do they have in Germany this institution of ombudsman, because legal system works. I guess that this approach is justified. In Germany, there is clearly and well-developed system of justice that is free from corruption. But we can see that the system of judiciary is complicated for simple consumers, and it is connected with the big expenditures. And briefly speaking, if you are small consumer, household consumer, and you have problems with the big company, the supplier, and if you want that this conflict is resolved through the court system, then you will face a number of problems. Often it happens that this dispute is difficult for you as a consumer, and for you it is difficult to deal with it. And this means that you have to address to the lawyer. And if you address to the lawyer, before he takes this case, you should pay some advance payment to him first. And when the lawyer files the case to the court on your behalf, you will have to pay in advance as well for court proceedings to start. And many minor consumers, they do not want to deal with it. And due to empirical studies carried out in Germany and in other countries of the European Union, it was identified that millions of such cases, such disputes, cannot be resolved in this way.
Die für den Verbraucher leicht zugänglich sind, die schnell sind und die für den Verbraucher keine Kosten verursachen.
And for this reason, the directive was adopted in the EU, and they decided to create a system of resolving the disputes that will be good for consumers, that would be fast and won't require a lot of money on behalf of the consumer. In Germany, Such an institution was created in 2011, and it is also envisaged in the law on energy. The system consists of two layers. The first is that the household consumer who has problems with suppliers of electricity or gas, he addresses to the supplier, to the company. And only after this, if he tried to resolve this problem with his supplier, after this he can submit and apply to the ombudsman. And in this way, the energy supplier or gas supplier, before ombudsman can resolve the issues by itself. And the company has 1 month in order to resolve the dispute. And if during this term, during this 1 month, this dispute is not resolved at a bilateral level of supplier and consumer, then the household consumer can address to the ombudsman office with the proper complaint in order to solve this issue. So the address to Ombudsman office is simple. This complaint, it is in the electronic form. You can submit it through the internet. There is a special form that is easy to complete, and this form is sent to the Ombudsman office, and at that the consumer does not spend any money. I think that I have to stop.
And answers, yeah.
Okay, 2 minutes. Ein privater Verein, der unabhängig arbeitet. Der Ombudsman ist unabhängig.
Наш офіс з регулювання конфліктів.
The office on resolving the dispute is a private organization. It is not governmental, and Ombudsman and our institution work independently. And I would like to stress 2 aspects. Firstly, if the consumer submitted the claim to our institution, then the supplier should take part in this dispute resolution process. Second important aspect is that supplier company should pay for the process of dispute resolution. So the company pays for this. And this expense the supplier pays if in the course of resolution of the dispute, so no matter what, the company should pay this money. The company should pay, and you understand that at the level of energy sector, so the representatives of energy sector do not like the situation.
We will go to the next speaker, and then after all two speakers end their speeches, we will give the floor to the people, to the participants who can ask the questions from the audience. So my question is general. The first of all, can you name the budget of the organization? It's one thing. The second is that how the companies are obliged to finance all these cases. They're doing this on their own, or there is the law that obliges them to participate in this. And can you give your vision? In Ukraine, it should be Energy Ombudsman institution, should be state, proper, private, or it should be some mixed system, and how it should be financed, in your opinion? 3 questions. Thank you.
Zunächst die Organisation unserer Schlichtungsstelle.
Спочатку стосовно організації нашої інституції.
Wir sind ein privater Verein.
Ми є приватною громадською організацією,
der gegründet worden ist von den Verbänden der Energiewirtschaft und den Verbänden, die die Verbraucherschutzinteressen wahrnehmen.
Наша інституція була утворена як з одного боку членами асоціації учасників енергетичного ринку, а з другого боку з боку асоціації захисту прав споживачів.
In den Gremien unseres Vereins sitzen deshalb Vertreter der Wirtschaft und Vertreter der Verbraucherschützer und Vertreter der staatlichen Verwaltung.
І тому в органах, які працюють в рамках нашої інституції, є як представники економіки, тобто представники енергетичного ринку, також є представники організацій, які займаються захистом споживачів, і представники державних органів.
Auf diesem Wege können die gegenläufigen Interessen sich gegenseitig kontrollieren.
І таким чином можна контролювати інтереси, які цікавлять насамперед різні представники, які не співпадають між собою.
Ich glaube, dass dieses System gut ist.
Я гадаю, що ця система є непоганою.
Die Finanzierung erfolgt ausschließlich darüber, dass wir für jeden Schlichtungsfall erheben.
Фінансування
The financing of our institution is done in such a way that for each case that we review, for each case in dispute resolution, the company, supplier company, should pay a fixed amount of money. And one of the main problems we face is the problem that there are companies, there are firms to whom we send bills to pay for our services, but they do not pay for these services. And this results in the fact that we then address to the courts against these companies because we cannot get this money from them. And I can tell you the actual figure. So they didn't pay us 200,000 euros. And this leads to the last question. In my opinion, it would be great if there is some state provision for to support our institution. So it would be good if the state would provide guarantees in case these firms do not pay, and would pay this money that are lacking.
Very sincere answers. It's very useful. Do we have the person on Skype? Okay, we have some technical problems. So now I'm giving the floor to Jose Manuel Hernandez Martinez. This person represents the EU delegation in Ukraine, and this is he's the first secretary dealing with the policy and on energy markets and competition policy.
Thank you. Actually, I think I have a presentation in the computer in the back room.
Презентацію ми маємо. Андрій, презентацію.
We have presentation.
And then in the meantime, do you have any system?
I think it will be given to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah,
this is it. Yeah.
Can you try to put in 10 minutes?
I can.
Yeah.
Definitely can.
Yeah, thank you. At least you have time to read the name of the presentation.
Yeah, we'll start and then I may get stuck in the first slide.
Yeah.
So I saw actually that two of your speakers today, they are specialist ombudsmen. So actually I decided to go one level up, which is trying to recap which are really the consumer rights of energy consumers under EU law. That will be the main scope of my presentation. But then the second bit I want to show you a little bit is how happy EU energy consumers are, and those which are unhappy, why are they unhappy? What I will not do really here is to go into a description of problems or the functioning of retail markets in the EU, because that will be an entirely separate issue here. Now, what EU law does is actually set up a number of principles or provisions that then national legislation needs to make operational. Today we've heard actually what is the German experience of how they actually implemented one of these principles. When it comes to EU law, we have two sources. One is horizontal consumer law, and the second one is sectorial energy law. And here in this presentation, we will actually see the decalogue of 10 consumer rights that stem from these two. And now I would actually need a second slide. Not yet, okay. So here, okay. Here it is, yeah. Perfect.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
Does it work?
First, I'm trying to get familiar with the device. Yeah, here it is. So this is the first slide, showing actually the very first 5 consumer rights. The first one we see on the screen is actually the right to get an electricity connection. So actually anyone with a home, they should have the right to get connected to the network. And this is the responsibility of the network operator. Now, what is the task of the regulator? So here the task of the regulator would be to actually set the tariffs, the terms and conditions under which that connection should take place. The second right that every EU consumer has is the choice of a supplier. We know that actually this is not still possible in Ukraine. There is actually a draft electricity law being discussed, but eventually the model chosen, it will resemble the EU model, and therefore this will be the chance of any Ukrainian consumer, which is not being able to choose which is your Oblenergo, which is your distribution company, but certainly which is the company that is going to supply you electricity or gas. The third right is having the choice is great, but this also needs to be easy and fast. And here you already have even certain indications of which are the time frames for actually making that happen. The fourth right is the contract. It has to be actually clear and understandable, and there are even provisions to avoid artificial barriers, for instance, preparing a very, very long contract. So here, a large volume is in principle not allowed. Now, there are also a number of items that the contracts needs to spell out. The name and address of the supplier, that is a very straightforward, understandable. I need to actually get back, here it is. But it also needs to include which are the provisions, for instance, for renewing the contract, for terminating the contract, for what could be the compensation to the consumer if the supplier is not respecting its obligations. And you also have provisions on how to file a complaint. Now, the fifth consumer right here is information on consumption. And here we refer to actual consumption. Most suppliers in the EU, they actually will give you an estimate of how much you are consuming. With this, you cannot really inform properly what do you actually want to do with your own supply, whether you want to be a bit more efficient, whether you actually want to change supplier. You are also the owner of your data, and therefore you should be able to access that data and give it to other competing suppliers if you would like them to make you an offer. And the last thing is that you also have the right to have an individual meter when you have a new building or a refurbished building. The second slide on consumer rights, we enter into the last 5. It's about energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. And here we get back again to the bills, and it's all about being able to tell you how much do you consume, as well as providing you with a comparison with how much you were consuming before. Because again, with no data, you actually do not know whether you can be or not more efficient. You actually have a bit more details here, but for the sake of time, I will actually move to the next consumer right, which is the protection of vulnerable consumers. Now here, EU law does not define what that means, but actually it does require national legislation to define it, considering local and national factors. And it also does require that you need to take measures to protect these consumers. The next one, and this is the core of actually this panel, is on easy resolution and inexpensive of the court settlement. And here, the previous speaker has already explained actually how it works in Germany, which actually follows exactly this sequence, which is first, the supplier must inform consumers how to file a complaint. 2, when a consumer wants to complain, it does go to the supplier. If the consumer is not happy, then they actually do need to go to a dispute settlement body. And even in the case that the consumer is not happy with that option, then is the last option, of course, going to a court. But as the previous speaker rightly pointed out, is an extremely expensive, burdensome, difficult process. So most likely they will always stay in the level before. The next one is in the field of energy performance in buildings. And here, when you are looking for renting or buying a house, you also need to get a certificate which is your energy performance of that building, and which could be the measures to improve that. And the final one is a single contact point. And this is what we actually call an advocacy consumer body that will actually tell consumers information about which are the rights, where to find legislation, about prices, suppliers, etc. The National Regulatory Agency has also got responsibility for ensuring that consumer rights are respected. Now we go into the second bit of the presentation, a little bit lighter. And this is actually a chart which has been taken from what we call the consumer scoreboard. This is an annual exercise which is actually just trying to map consumer perception across all service and goods markets. Here, it's what they call a market performance indicator. It actually groups more or less 4 factors. It is how much consumers actually trust, how much the supplier is meeting the expectation of the consumer. It also includes an area of comparability of offers. And finally, it also factors in how much consumers complain and the damage that actually that problem is causing on the consumer. On that basis, they actually chart the whole 31 sectors that you actually have here. And what I've done is to actually subtract the value you obtain minus the average of all services. And here we can see that electricity services are not really featuring very positively. Actually, is the 4th worst, starting from the bottom. Gas is a little bit better. But what is also important here, of course, we have quite a number of services which are in full competition. But if we even compare to those which are utilities, electricity and gas are not doing too well, because they're actually doing worse than, for instance, fixed telephony, water supply, or even postal services, which is even above the average. So certainly room for improvement. This is the last slide here. And this is when consumers complain, on what do they complain? This was actually taken from a study which was run from 2010-2015 and actually took a sample of just 30,000 complaints. Here, ombudsmen, they actually require to classify complaints according to certain categories, and this was actually the result. What we can see is that the building is the top with 30% of all the complaints. And then if we look into the first 3, it's all about building, contracts, and unfair commercial practices. That is nearly 50%. And then followed already by quality of services. So here what you can see is, as a consumer, or eventually as an ombudsman, what actually complaints may actually fall here. And the last slide is actually just giving you further reading in case you really want to dive into retail markets. We actually have, the first one is a compilation of 3 studies on consumer perception, extremely informative, looking into switching rates, problem with billing, comparability of offers, vulnerable consumers. The second one is the latest action by the Commission on trying to see where the problems are for retail markets and what could be the solutions to find a way to overcome them. That would be it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. It was very interesting, very brief, and really getting the whole picture. for me it's very interesting and very important that even in the European Union that we consider to be the ideal model of Ukrainian development in general, there are the same problems that we have in Ukraine. Of course, maybe not in this stage, but frankly speaking, these figures, considering the complaints and the satisfaction of the quality of the services that big suppliers provide in energy, in gas and electricity, show that we face the same challenges. And so, in general, I have one very concrete question regarding what I have heard from you. In general, you understand that we are in the transforming period, that we are now we have drafted the law, electricity law. We drafted gas law that was adopted, electricity law, we hope it will be adopted. So, from your position, how can European Commission, help Ukraine, help local stakeholders, ministries, or NGOs to promote further consumer protection system in Ukraine? In very simple question, that I think that a lot of people want to hear the answer is European Commission eager and willing to finance some projects and programs in this sphere in Ukraine?
I'm actually coming more from the policy dimension, but I can actually tell you what is the emphasis in this field. And when the Energy Union was actually adopted in 2015, the whole core of actually the reforms in the EU was all about all this is being done for the consumer. I mean, this is actually, certainly economic efficiencies are important, but it is all for the consumer. So here we are now at the stage which is just primary legislation, and here we are putting a lot of effort. Colleagues actually in Brussels with the support group for Ukraine, myself here to support electricity and competition policy, to just at least help in the way we can with expertise in the design of the market. Now, my colleagues dealing with projects, I do know actually there are quite a number of them ongoing. And the issue of consumer affairs, it's a question of defining at which point in time this is actually going to feature. I don't know if you have any concrete proposal on anything which actually relates to consumer affairs, because we'll be actually happy to hear that. For the time being, we are mostly looking into the design, really, of the framework. Consumer affairs, it is all when you have the possibility to choose a supplier, in principle. And therefore, for the time being, we are a little bit far from having that operational design.
You have to understand that today we tape your speeches, so NGOs will come to your delegation saying that we heard someone from you saying that we need new projects. Okay, I'm of course joking, but frankly speaking, I have a very direct question. How long have you been living in Ukraine?
Very little for the time being, 1.5 months.
So I had a question. So, okay, no, I won't ask you the question whether we are ready, really ready to build this structure, because maybe you don't have this big experience with dealing our great monopolies in this sphere. But in general, thank you. I thank you very much for your sincere answers, and I think that I won't take the chance from the audience to take to get some questions from them.
Шановні колеги, хто хоче задати запитання, будь ласка, представтеся і... Доброго дня, Олег.
I represent the Consumer Protection Union of Ukraine, an NGO. German system of consumer right protection. Oleg Silvik. Question to Mr. Jürgen. German system of consumer rights protection is very well developed and branchy, and the policy requires that the consumer claims are resolved in extrajudiciary procedure prior to court's trial. So who is the target audience? Either the individuals, your target audience, or small enterprises, which in our opinion, in our legislation, which is different from consumer protection law, who is the target audience?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, please.
In dem deutschen System
In the German system, the matters of conflict settlement between consumers, private consumers and companies, our institution deals with them. This means that even small entrepreneurs and craftsmen, they can't be our client, they can't submit their claims to us seeking settlement of disputes. This is, of course, a limitation, significant limitation, but it is also envisaged by the EU acquis communautaire because protection of consumer rights, it is targeted on individuals. Often we have such conflict situations appearing. We receive complaints to settle conflict. We get complaints from small entrepreneurs, but they are not private consumers, they are not households. For example, if they submit a complaint to us, if I understand that the electricity is used not for private household purposes, for kitchen, for example, but the consumer uses electricity for producing pizzas, for example, then we stop considering his or her complaint because they are not our target audience. This means that small entrepreneur, an individual entrepreneur should go to court and free of charge settlement of disputes. This is the right to which only individuals are entitled.
This is a very typical problem in Ukraine when there is small enterprises have huge problems with the network accession, for example, and this stops prevents doing business, and this what we all have the problem, all the business in Ukraine. Of course, this is in physical people, I mean, who wants to build the house and to get access to networks, but especially it's very typical for small enterprises, that's for private business. So this question, that's why our colleague asked this question. Да, будь ласка, представтеся і...
Once again, I'm a representative of national regulator. Do you address such issues as violations acts? For example, stealing of electricity by individuals as consumers, because national regulator get very many such complaints of this type. Do you address them? Do you consider them? And the second question, total number of individual consumers, how many complaints do you receive annually to address controversial issues? Thank you. I think there were 3 questions. The first question was stealing electricity. As concerns this, often consumers apply to us with such questions. He sends a complaint that the bill was too high, that this is impossible. Why should I pay extra cost for the electricity which I have not consumed? For example, such case when a consumer files a complaint to us, I have been using 2,000 kilowatts annually for 10 years, and this year I received a bill for 10,000 kilowatts. This is impossible. I have not consumed so much. This is the core of complaint. This is very complicated case for us because we are approaching the end of our opportunities. The reasons why such high figures of consumption appear, they could be different such reasons. First, maybe some problems with a meter, electricity meter. We have in such a case the possibility through some independent organization to verify meter functionality, whether it operates properly. However, the situation may be that upon the findings of this verification, we get information that the meter works properly. The consumer claims that he has not changed his consumption pattern. Then, two alternatives can be. Maybe the electricity is really stolen when some devices are connected outside the meter by someone. or this is the other case when some manipulations have been conducted to the meter itself. In both cases, the thing is this acts, such actions, they are punishable according to criminal legislation. In these cases, we say that we can't resolve this conflict. This is a matter to be addressed by police or court. The second question. In Germany, there are nearly 40 million contracts for electricity and gas supply, so the potential is very high to address potential conflicts. This means that we should extend 40 million private individuals contracts for electricity supply to individuals. The number of complaints to settle conflicts during 5 years, it varied. It was not constant. It changed from year to year during 5 years. To provide you very specific answer, in 2013 there were 14,000 complaints. In 2014 there were about 10,000 complaints which we considered. In 2015 all of a sudden we had only 5,000 complaints. This year the situation is like that. 6.5 thousand complaints we have already.
To close our panel, because the next panel should go on. Thank you very much for your participation. Ми, на жаль, повинні закрити цю панель і йти на наступну панель, тому що вже час проводити засідання. Давайте. Окей.
Thank you. Can you tell us, are there any cases when energy supplier company address you to protect the company from unreasonable complaints on the part of consumers? Companies, may they submit applications to you to be protected, and is there a system like this applicable to other monopolies such as water suppliers? And do you protect companies from consumer claims? As concerns the first question, yes, companies, suppliers may apply to our office. However, they are just individual cases and they are very few, and it's a pity for me. The second question. I will give you a very brief answer. As concerns heat and water supply, we have a system how to resolve disputes, but this system operates on the basis of relevant European Union directive, and they address other matters. This is not our competence. I would like to accent once again I want to accent that the peculiar feature of considering disputes in Germany, dispute settlement in Germany, a supplier company should take part in consideration of such a conflict. This means that concerning heat supply and water supply, there is no such obligation. Supplier may say, I don't want to take part in peaceful negotiations, in amicable negotiations.
He is the former Minister of Energy of Ukraine, so he knows very well this topic, and that's why he understands what he asking and why he asking these things. Okay, please, one more question.
Thank you. Sehr geehrter Herr Kipp.
Роман Новинский, Цимля GmbH.
Die Versorgerunternehmen sind nicht verpflichtet, bei Endkunden die Messeinrichtungen anzubauen. Es gibt eine Möglichkeit, dass Endkunde das selber tut, aber die Verfahren ist so kompliziert und überdurchschnittlich kann in manchen Fällen bis 6 Monate oder bis ein Jahr dauert. Und wie gesagt, es ist nicht unzumutbar für Otto-Durchschnittsverbraucher. Und natürlich Energieversorgerunternehmen sind nicht hier interessiert daran, das ja zu unterstützen.
Перекладіть, будь ласка. Можна для аудиторії, я перекладу, спробую. Значить, питання стосувалося...
The question is how installation of meters procedure looks like in Germany. In Ukraine, this is a very complicated matter. Suppliers are not obliged to install meters in Ukraine, and often we meet the situation when a consumer himself install a meter, but then he should register the meter, and the procedure of registering may take 6 months. Be brief, please, and please better in Ukrainian. Ask your question in Ukrainian. This question is very important because without the possibility of metering energy, which is consumed, we can't settle disputes, because then a consumer can't prove that he has not consumed some volume of energy. For Ukraine, with 14 millions of households, how many offices like this Ukraine needs? In Germany, we should make clear we should divide suppliers from network operators. The task to connect to networks, gas networks, electricity networks, this is the task of network operator, not the task of supplier. A meter, when it is installed, it should be verified and adjusted, and it should operate according to legislation requirements. This means that in our activities, when we address dispute settlement, we proceed from the assumption that the meter works properly. That's all. I think that I can declare the coffee break, and I would like to accent that Mr. Jürgen will be present in this hall, so you can ask him questions during breaks, even in German, if you like.
Дякую, але це не закінчення, ми продовжуємо, оскільки ми... Дякую.
We continue.
Ми продовжуємо, оскільки ми проговорили.
So we were speaking about theory and experience of Europe.